Today's video lesson and class discussion is going to be on a streetcar named Desire. Going to start off with the basic overview and simple, brief synopsis and setup of the story. Won't delve into the whole thing, and then we'll dive into the themes and any adaptations that were done of the play and the reception to said adaptations in the play in general. So we'll start off with talking about the background information. So, as stated, A Streetcar Named Desire is a play that was written by Tennessee Williams, and it was written on Broadway, performed on Broadway in 1947. And when it first premiered, the content and the themes that it was dealing with, and we'll talk about this later, tend to deal around sex and violence and assault. So when it first premiered, it was extremely shocking at the time. Obviously, if it were to come out today, it probably wouldn't be as shocking because we have so much material that can be quite gratuitous. But at the time, you have to put it in that context, and it really shocked and surprised people. But even with that being said, it was a big hit, a major hit. People applauded. Actors like Marlon Brando and Jessica Tandy were not as well known at the time, so them playing Blanche and Blanche Dubois and Stanley Kowalski with those roles, they exploded. Now, Brando would obviously go on to explode more in other roles, but this really helped him come to the forefront. And so, moving on to the brief plot setup. So, the story follows Blanche, who has gone through some rough patches in her life, and so she goes, she flees where she had been living and moves in with her sister, Stella, and her husband, Stanley. And so as the three of them kind of live together, there's tension that starts to boil underneath the surface because Stanley doesn't exactly like/trust Blanche. And so he sort of comes in and causes a lot of problems. And by the end of the play, Blanche reaches a boiling point and she ends up exploding. If you've read the work, then you know what happens. If not, when we talk about the themes, there will be a little bit of spoilers. But even with that being said, I do recommend it. It's tough to get through, but it is great. So now we're going to delve into the themes. So the themes that A Streetcar Named Desire deals with are a few, with the main ones being sex, death, desire, and fantasy versus reality. So when it comes to fantasy versus reality, we can see that Blanche is living in a fantasy world, right? She's living in her own version of the world and her life and what she wants it to be, rather than facing the reality of her situation. And the themes kind of blend together. So I might just talk about all of them at once, but the reason why Blanche, sort of lives in this fantasy type of world is that she doesn't want to come to terms where she's at in her life and what has led her to come to this point in her life, because she's kind of known for having a little bit of sexual escapades, and that ended up really causing the problems in her life. She was basically caught having an affair with one of her students, whom she was a great deal older with, and so that caused some problems. And her husband and their relationship wasn't exactly the best to begin with, and when she found out that her husband was homosexual, she basically lambasted him, instead of talking to him about it. And even if she didn't agree with his lifestyle, instead of just talking to him about it and maybe getting a divorce, she just lambasted him for it. And so that led to his suicide. So you put that together with her sexual escapade with her student and just how she tries to find confidence in her sexuality and make that her identity, that really caused a lot of problems for her. And it's her confident, maybe confidence is the right word, but excuse me, wanting to really have her identity placed in her sexuality is what continues to cause her problems, mainly with Stanley, because as I said, Stanley doesn't like her, he doesn't trust her. So near the end of the play, I guess near the end of it, in the third act, if you want to say, what ends up happening is Stanley rapes Blanche, And so she had already kind of reached a boiling point mentally where she'd had so much piling up, piling up. And when that happened, it just boiled over and caused her to really have a mental breakdown. And so, again, the themes that the story is dealing with are bleak. They're very, very bleak, but they're ones worth discussing. So, taking a look now at the reception of the play, as I mentioned, audiences were shocked when they first saw it because, again, a lot of the content and the themes was so, for the time, gratuitous, but the way it was written and the way the play was directed and the way it was acted in particular really blew people away again, I think, with the standouts being Jessica Tandy and Brando. That really helped to launch their careers. Brando would obviously go on to be a big hit and major more of a star with something like The Godfather, which he won an Oscar for, On the Waterfront, which he won his first Oscar for, Apocalypse Now, which he would star in later. And so those really helped solidify. And of course, the film adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire that Elia Kazan directed, which led to Brando's first Oscar nomination. So he really exploded on the scene as far as, after that. It's not like he was a one-hit wonder as far as acting goes, and then he just disappeared. No, he would continue to grow. And even to this day, many, I think, would say that he's one of the greatest actors to have ever lived. And I would agree with that. He's just completely, even if you don't like the movie that he's in, he's always going to be fantastic. So, and that play that Elia Kazan directed that starred Brando, Vivian Leigh, Carl Malden, and Kim Hunter is probably the adaptation of the source material that has been the most critically well received, as far as I could tell. It was the one that was received the best, the most, and I think it's the one that people tend to go back to the most. I have not seen it myself, but just from doing research, that's what I was able to find. And as such, the film adaptation that Kazan directed went on to win 4 Oscars for Best Actress for Vivian Leigh, Best Supporting Actor for Carl Malden, Best Supporting Actress for Kim Hunter, and Best Art Direction, Black and White. And as I mentioned earlier when talking about Brando, it was his first Oscar nomination of 4 that would appear in his career. So that would be Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, which he would go on to win, The Godfather, which he would go on to win also, and I believe the other one might have been Apocalypse Now. I'm blanking on what the 4th one was, but I do believe it was Apocalypse Now. Moving on to differences between the play and film adaptation, I'm not going to mention a whole lot, but just a few. The film and play differ in a few important ways. So the play itself is set inside the Kowalski's apartment for the entirety. It doesn't move anywhere, but the film version goes to several different places besides the Kowalski apartment. The setting is drastically shifted. Rather than it being in one place like something like, say, 12 Angry Men for most of the location, it